The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Yes, well, good morning, everyone. My name is Jay Ferris with Nebraska Farm Bureau. I'd like to welcome everybody here this morning to our webinar on the right to repair issue. This is an issue that we are currently at Nebraska Farm Bureau do not have current policy on, and so we are hosting this webinar to give more information to our Farm Bureau members. We are in that policy development process now. We will be having those discussions at county annual meetings, also at our policy forum in November, and then the final part of that process will be at our state convention in December. So this is a good time and opportunity to be talking about this issue and others as well, but primarily this morning we'll be focusing on the right to repair issue. Just a couple of house cleaning tips for those of you that are joining us on this webinar this morning. We have 4 presenters this morning, and that is Kyle Wiens with the iFixit Corporation. We have Gay Gordon-Byrne, and we have Will Rogers and Natalie Higgins are also presenting this morning. We will be getting both pros and cons on this issue. And we will let them give their presentations. We will also have the opportunity for those of you viewing the webinar to ask questions, and there are 2 ways that you can do that. One is if you raise your hand, I will see that your hand is raised, and if you have a microphone or if you're calling in this morning, I can unmute your telephone, and you can ask that question live. There's also a question button over on the side on your control panel, and if you type a question in there, I can read that question and I can ask that question of our panelists. Also this morning, on the control panel, there is a handout, and that handout you can download our background questionnaire that is to our members, that we're asking some questions and giving you some background information on what we're needing to know in the form of policy on that end of it. So with that, we had a flip of the coin earlier, and Kyle and Gay are going to be they're going to present first. So with that, Kyle and Gay, I'm going to let you guys take it from there.
Wonderful. Well, I'm Kyle. I started iFixit. We're a free online repair manual. And Gay runs repair.org, which is the advocacy site that's really a group of grassroots organizations that are working to defend owners' rights. So I think I'll let Gay kind of give an intro of what we're working on, and then I'll go into a little bit of kind of on-the-ground details of like what this would mean for actual repair of this equipment.
Sure. Since I created this PowerPoint last night at about 10 o'clock, it's probably best that I run through it quickly, and Kyle, you can jump in or add in as you see fit. Obviously, Kyle is in charge of iFixit. It's an enormous free website for repair, and we have been teaming together for about 3 years now. We pulled together repair.org 3 years ago, and it is an umbrella association of organizations and individual businesses that are in the business of repair, recycling, reuse, and it's a technology-focused business. So we are talking in very general terms about what it means to own technology and repair technology. Do I have any controls over this PowerPoint? Or
nope, you just tell me and I can hit the next button for you.
All right, hit it. Hit it.
There you go.
Okay. The reason that we've been bringing right to repair, we also call it fair repair, it kind of depends on the preference of the legislator, is that anytime there's a computer embedded in anything, it's still a computer. So it can be in a tractor, it can be in a router, it can be in a tablet, it can be in your GPS system, it can be in your cell phone, and it's still a computer. And the unique part about computers is that they are small. You can't just make one in your backyard or on your shop bench. You may be able to adjust some of the components, but you actually, unless you're in China manufacturing chips, you're not going to have much luck doing it by yourself. So you need more information and just an ordinary piece of furniture. you really are very dependent upon the manufacturer for the type of information that is essential for repair. And if you don't get that information for whatever reason, repair is easily monopolized, and it's very literally monopolized in a number of markets. Agriculture is one of them, but it also extends to cell phones and ordinary computers. We're having tremendous difficulties having equipment repaired. In medical equipment, it's very pervasive. So without the information, manufacturers have the option very easily to establish pricing that may or may not be close to reasonable. There's no competition. There's no real incentive on the part of the manufacturer to expand their quality. I'm not saying anybody is doing a bad job. I'm just saying the incentive is not there. And as a result, people that might otherwise innovate and work on their equipment and come up with the better mousetrap are really kind of stuck. So how about the next slide? Jay? Jay? Thank you. What is required under fair repair, which we filed in Nebraska, is LB 1072, but it has almost identical corollary bills in multiple states, some of which also have big agricultural interests. Believe it or not, New York State has 35,000 primarily dairy farmers that have agreed through New York Farm Bureau that they want to be in support of fair repair. So all it requires is exactly what has been required of automobiles and commercial trucks, and already agreed in statute, meaning in law, in Massachusetts, to provide access to service documentation, the diagnostics, service tools. When I say essential firmware, that is the guts of what lets a chip talk to a network card, talk to a talk to any of the internal componentry. And sometimes that stuff is wrong, and it gets updated with a patch or a fix requirement on the firmware side. And the one thing we did add, because of the uniqueness of the electronics industry being very highly dynamic and having a lot of different products released just every couple of months, is service parts. This is pretty ordinary stuff. It's been stuff that we've been able to get over the years, and it's simply kind of fallen off common practice, and we want to see that that gets returned. Jay, our next slide if we can. There is significant legal foundation behind these bills, and we didn't make this up. This was already in process, and already why the auto and truck industries have already come around to this, because it really is important that the vehicle owner or the product owner does act as the owner, and that means that the purchase agreement is a complete agreement, and that if there are links to other agreements that must be made, those come under the heading of antitrust law. So it's very important that we make sure that people actually own what they own, and that includes owning agricultural equipment, which I think everybody understands should be owned. There's another element of this that happens a lot in consumer electronics products, is that you'll see a lot of products that have terms and conditions that say to the owner, you won't even open the device, or in the case of stickers that go on parts saying, if you remove this sticker, you voided your warranty. That's all unfair and deceptive trade practices. On the warranty side, there's Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act. But just to be clear, that a lot of what's being provided by manufacturers, and this does not necessarily mean anything to do with tractor or farm equipment manufacturers, is literally unfair and deceptive, which means that it's good. State law makes sense. A very large point of confusion with bills is that there's assumptions that these bills do something about copyrights, patents, and trade secrets, which they don't. They can't. State law cannot preempt federal law, so it's not. And this is, again, we took the template of the auto and truck agreements and just copied it. So everything that they've agreed to is part of the legal foundation of LB 1072. And Kyle can speak more to this because he was really involved in it. The idea of tinkering with your engine and emission software has fallen under copyright law, and it will newly be an option for farm owners come the end of October. All right, Jay. We know everybody's got a lot of concerns, and just to touch on a couple of them, and then we can get into some of the details. You will not lose your warranty coverage as a result of fair repair. There's nothing about warranties in fair repair. Whatever the warranty agreement is the warranty agreement. It is optional for the owner. And frankly, if the warranty is only 1 or 2 years long and you're in year 5, it may not even be material. So I think we ought to keep the eye on the ball that these are long-term assets and they need to have the opportunity of support for a very long term, 5, 10, 20 years at least. I know everybody's worried about losing the local dealership tax. It's definitely a consolidating industry, and frankly, retailing of all kinds is a consolidating industry. The internet has really changed how people buy everything, and I don't think that fair repair is going to accelerate the loss, but it is a concern, and I think we'd like to make sure everybody understands that right now, if the dealership is the only source of technicians, then losing that dealership is hugely impactful to the local community. We think that the business of repair is not associated with the business of retail, and it can clearly be done locally. It does not have to be done through the dealership. In fact, most repair models and most other equipment are not dealership repair. So you just want to keep in mind that there is a crisis. It should not get worse. It should get better under fair repair. Training and certification, that's an issue that we feel is the choice of the owner. Some businesses, and this is not unique to farming, some businesses take advantage of independent training capabilities. There's a big organization called CompTIA that offers hundreds of different certifications for working with electronic equipment. And that forms the basis of a lot of training and certification in other industries. And I'm sure there are master technician training options in engine repair. All of that stuff still exists. None of it changes. And the only thing that changes is that people will have choices. They may make bad choices. And I'm not saying that they won't pick a bad tech. But the marketplace will reward good ones and punish bad ones. And safety and liability, I know we've talked about this before, Natalie. Again, it comes down to who owns the equipment. If you're the farmer and you own your tractor, if you're the one that drives off the field and gets hurt, it's your problem. You insured the product. You carry personal medical insurance. You carry personal liability insurance. These are things that you know that when you bought the product are your problem. There are obviously limitations to where that ends with manufacturer's liability, but their liability really is to provide safe equipment under various manufacturing standards. And if the farmer gets hurt because of a manufacturing defect, then it's still a defect. But most of the time we're talking about actual accidents. Poor choices, things that happen, just like they happen with cars and trucks. So I hope we can explain that and get everybody comfortable with that there's really no particular change. Is that the end?
That's it.
Okay.
That is.
So Kyle,
Thanks,
I
Kay.
know you have stuff to add.
Yeah, and maybe it would be good to step back a little bit from some of the details. Gay does a really good job diving into the details, and she works very closely with the legislators. And let's just talk about what we're trying to get done, and the problems that are happening out there. The issue is, and this is really an issue that's come to the forefront in the last 10 years, is that we're adding electronics to farm equipment. We have been capable of repairing our own equipment for a very long time. I mean, fixing and tinkering with equipment. I mean, in California, I work with a lot of strawberry farmers, and whether we're making our own implements or modifying implements, taking two, completely unrelated pieces of equipment, welding them together, like we'll hack whatever it takes to get the job done. And I mean, that's kind of what it means to be a farmer, is we're problem solvers. And I'm a software guy. My background is software engineering, so I understand electronics really well, and I understand that the mechanical side of working on these things. And what's happening is that there's kind of two sets of law. There's the law that governs physical property, things that you can do with your physical stuff. And then there's the laws that govern books and movies and that kind of stuff. And when you add software to a physical product, you merge those two worlds. And all of a sudden there are a lot of very complex products. But they're not just complex mechanically. We've been able to deal with these complex mechanical products, but we haven't been able to deal with the complex electronics because you can't just open it up and see what's inside. You actually have to have access to some of the software diagnostics from the manufacturers. And that's really the sea change. And manufacturers are adding electronics to these products. They're not doing it to be vindictive. Like, this is the future. The products are better. They get better fuel economy. They have lower emissions when we have electronics in our equipment. But it makes repair more challenging. Actually, if you have access to the diagnostic software, it makes the repair easier. But if you don't have access to the diagnostic software, it's just a black box. And I think we've all been in a situation where you had a piece of equipment that was throwing a code, and you call the dealer, and he won't give you what the code is until he can send a technician down and plug a laptop in, but his technician is booked up until the end of the day or first thing tomorrow, and you're just stuck, and you have a $300,000 piece of machinery that won't move, and you're completely at the mercy of somebody else. And that's not what farming is, right? We're out here on our own. We should be able to be a bit more self-reliant. And actually, a lot of the folks that are supporting this legislation are folks that are involved in really making sure that the people at the grassroots level, people that are out in the country, have access to the materials they need to be able to support themselves. The Institute for Local Self-Reliance is a group that focuses on making sure that we can be off the grid and capable of taking care of ourselves without having to go back to the manufacturer. I run iFixit, and we started out teaching people how to fix iPhones and laptops, and Apple is one of the companies that really has made it hard for people in rural areas. And they have 450 retail stores. So if you're in San Francisco, you can go to the Apple store and they'll take care of you and it's fine. But if you're far away from an Apple store, you're kind of hosed. If you have a phone that breaks, they say there's no option. You mail into us, we'll fix it for you, send it back to you in 2 weeks, and that's not an acceptable option for a piece of equipment like an iPhone that is absolutely critical infrastructure for all of us. So what is this legislation doing? That's groundbreaking. What are the concerns? Because we hear a lot of kind of this fear, uncertainty, doubt, saying, well, it's gonna hurt the local dealers. It's going to drive the local dealers out of business. It's going to take intellectual property and allow people to copy products, whether it's tools or the equipment themselves. The easiest way to see that a lot of that uncertainty is false is just to look at the automotive industry. We've had right to repair in the car industry since the 1970s. The most recent auto right to repair bill was passed in 2012, but we've had laws on the books for a long time. And I think that if you think about what you can do with your F-150 that you can't do with your Deere, it's really profound. You can get access to diagnostics to debug a transmission speed sensor. You can get parts from Ford that you can't necessarily get from some of these equipment companies. You can get access to the full service manual that Ford has, that their dealers have for the F-150. You can't get for a lot of this higher tech ag equipment, particularly some of the GPS links and some of the newer precision driving equipment. So we've had right to repair for a long time, and the nice thing is we can say, well, is the sky going to fall if we pass this legislation? And we just have to look at the car industry and say, hey, do we have local auto dealers that are very profitable? Yeah. Are people causing safety problems with their F-150 right after they repair it themselves? No, I haven't heard of a single incident of somebody repairing things themselves or an independent dealer or an independent mechanic causing a problem that really has been a major issue. We hear safety concerns a lot where they say, well, if we allow farmers or if we allow independent mechanics to work on these things, and we
Oh, it looks like Kyle maybe has frozen.
Up, they're gonna have there he is. But you're actually a lot safer if you. Oh, there I'm back. Okay, sorry. My network cut out. I write repair manuals for a living, and one of the things that we found is that the more information that you can put out there, the more public it is. If you can put out the right way to do it, you increase the safety of everybody across the board. So I don't want to take any more time. I want to pass it over to our friends at the Equipment Dealers Association. A bit of background on myself. I grew up in a Honda and Harley dealer. My dad ran a Honda, Harley, Yamaha dealership. He sold ATVs and motorcycles and boats for a long time. So I understand how hard it is to set up and run a local dealership. It's a lot of work. You spend a lot of time investing in equipment and training and tools. But you also have the support of the manufacturer, and you know, when my dad was selling Honda equipment, he could fly back to Japan and get access to information from Honda. A lot of advantages that the dealers have over an independent mechanic, even after right to repair comes into effect. And certainly right to repair on the auto side hasn't hurt the local automotive dealers at all. Honestly, it makes them better because we have a bit more competition. So that's really what this is about, is saying, hey, give us a second option. We know we've got the dealer network option. We know it's working reasonably well, but there's some problems with it. So let us maintain our own equipment, and let me use a mechanic of my choice.
Okay, well, thank you, Kyle and Gay. Now we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Will and Natalie. Who would like to have control of the...
I would, please.
Okay, I will give that to Will.
All right, is my slides up?
Just a minute. You should be able to click on a button that says share my screen.
Okay. All right, can everybody see the PowerPoint?
I can see it.
All right. All right. And is that all that people can see on there? I've got a little...
Yeah, they should be able to see your pictures as well. So.
Okay, great.
Video?
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So, again, my name is Will Rogers. I'm the head of government affairs for the Iowa-Nebraska Equipment Dealers Association. We represent over 475 farm, construction, lawn and leisure, and outdoor power equipment companies in Iowa and Nebraska. And I'm joined by my colleague, Natalie Higgins, who's the head of government relations from the Equipment Dealers Association. She's based out of the St. Louis area. So we're delighted to be able to visit with you this morning and appreciate the opportunity to clear up some confusion regarding your rights in fixing and repairing your farm equipment. There's a lot of misinformation that we've seen being spread around right now by about farmers and their rights and when it comes to fixing their own equipment. And just in the last couple months, we've seen several articles published online that have indicated that farmers don't have the right to fix their own equipment, or that they can't choose a company where they want to have their equipment serviced, or that it is against the law to pop the hood on their farm equipment. And not only are these statements misleading, but they just don't hold up when they're faced with the facts. So I included this next slide in here for folks. If you hadn't seen this, this is from Rick Friday, who used to draw for the Farm News. And I think this is, again, this is how simple the idea has been boiled down to, yet how misleading it is as well. And the thing is I don't know that there's probably anybody out there that believes that if you start working on your own farm equipment, that the police are going to show up at your farm, handcuff you, arrest you, and haul you off to jail. So that's something that we're trying to make sure that we have a conversation about today with everyone. Natalie?
Yeah, so appreciate it, Will. Happy to be here with everyone this morning, and it's nice to see Gay and Kyle again. So this is an issue that we've been talking a lot about, and we wanted to talk about what we already know, and that's that farmers do have the right to make repairs on their equipment. You know, and you already have a significant number of options. You can do it yourself, you can utilize a third-party repair company, or you can take it to your local authorized dealership. You know, in the state of Nebraska alone, there's over 100 different places that you can choose to take your piece of equipment to have it serviced. And similarly, when it comes to purchasing replacement parts, you can go to your dealership. You can purchase them through an aftermarket store. You can purchase them online through a number of retailers. And beyond that, the idea that service manuals aren't available is just not true. Farm equipment machinery manuals are available to owners and to third parties currently. So that's not something that would need to be changed under state legislation, as that information is already available both to owners and to third parties. So finally, when it comes to software, yes, there are restrictions in place as to who can make changes to the operating system, and we think those restrictions are in place for good reason. As Gay brought up, the copyright laws are changing, and owners of equipment will be able to do any number of things to that software at this point, basically except for violate the law by circumventing EPA emissions requirements that are set in the code, or by circumventing legally required safety mechanisms that are in that code, or to copy the code illegally. So we thought that was a pretty fair and reasoned response, and frankly update to the law that probably needed to be taken care of. So we're pleased with that. But again, there are things that are restricted, and we think they're restricted for good reason. So would you mind changing to the next slide?
I'm on it.
So, so what kind of information is restricted? The areas that are restricted because of the safety, environmental, warranty, and liability issues that giving unrestricted access to anyone would implicate. As a practical matter, there are some very unique areas of liability that the release of this information would have as it pertains to equipment performance, equipment safety, warranty, and even a dealer and manufacturer's obligations to conform that product with their advertising standards. So those are different liability issues that are nuanced and not simple, that we'd like to flesh out as part of this conversation.
Yeah. So the first thing we want to make sure that we visit about is the EPA and how the Tier 4 engine has really changed everything when it comes to how manufacturers can be held liable, or dealers can be held liable for non-compliance with emission standards. And when the EPA requires that a piece of farm equipment, when it is brought into a dealership and it's found that that emission system has been tinkered with and is in non-compliance, the dealer can either, be required to reset the, engine to its original specifications, or potentially face very stiff penalties and fines. It was mentioned earlier that there was the Massachusetts law dealing with cars, and one of the understandings that as far as my investigation goes, that in the auto mechanic, auto technician world, is when they come across a vehicle where like something has been taken off, like a catalytic converter, that basically renders the vehicle almost maybe unserviceable in a dealership setting, meaning that if someone brings it in and they've willfully tampered with the exhaust system, that the dealers are either some repairing that, or they're just refusing flat out to do any work on that car out of fear of being fined by the EPA. In addition, our dealers, have these emission systems that, they encounter. These are specifically calibrated and controlled through that onboard computer and operating system.
Right, and so the next thing I'd like to get back to is the safety issue, and Gay brought up assumption of the risk, and if a farmer modifies or repairs properly a piece of equipment and that gives rise to an injury, then theoretically that's on the person that made the improper repair or the improper modification. And as an attorney, I can tell you that it's not that simple. All of those issues are going to be dealt with differently based upon the product liability law in a given state. And beyond that, an equipment owner cannot assume the risk for any third party. That's simply not a good argument. If that owner injures a third party, whether it be a farm worker or someone that has nothing to do with the farm, it's very likely that a smart attorney is going to find a way to bring either the authorized dealer that serviced that piece of equipment or the manufacturer into the chain of liability for purposes of a lawsuit. And I don't have to tell you that it's a very unenviable situation, a very expensive situation, even if the dealer or the manufacturer didn't have anything to do with that improper repair. Proving it and knowing it are two different things. So that's the first thing I wanted to address. And then I don't have to tell all of you that farm equipment isn't going to get less sophisticated in the future. And so when we're looking at this type of legislation, we need to be looking towards what's coming down the pike. We are very close to having production model tractors that are going to operate autonomously. And at some point when that equipment malfunctions, we need to be able to look and know who the last person was to get in and to either modify or repair that software code. It's going to be absolutely critical for determining who the liable party is. And these laws need to have a mechanism for dealing with that type of situation and to be taking a long view of what's going to be an appropriate remedy, because this is not going to get easier as the equipment gets more sophisticated. You know, like I said, when situations like that arise, or situations like that do arise, lawyers are going to come, you know, after the independent mechanic, but they're also going to come after any other dealer or manufacturer in the chain. And again, it's just an unfortunate situation to be in. And we think these are the questions that need to be asked with respect to liability.
The third concern, and I'll just briefly touch on this, is the area of warranty and how products under warranty could be affected when a user or a third party make an unauthorized repair or change, more importantly, a change to the product. Most people would assume that when someone would go in and change how a piece of equipment functions, whether it's to increase horsepower or performance or tinkers with it in some way, that it would fall out of warranty. But in some cases, again, not so fast. We've had people that have said, in fact, that no, if it is under warranty, in fact, the dealer should have to stand behind that product. And so that's, again, and the manufacturers as well. And that's something, again, that questioning that assumption of liability for someone else's repair or work or changes to the equipment that we're not ready to really give up at this point. Okay, Natalie?
So again, dealers view farmers as their partners in business, as their partners in the community. It's a very important relationship, obviously, and we're not here to cut off the conversation, but we just want to educate people on what their existing rights are as it pertains to their equipment. The bottom line is that for the average farmer, we think that most of the service information you need is already available. What we think proponents of this type of legislation are generally looking for is that very sophisticated software and technology that's restricted because the release of that code requires discretion, experience, and training to make sure that that repair is identified properly and done and performed properly. So it's not as simple as just release of the code, but also having that training, that experience, that discernment to be able to do that in a way that's safe and preserves the integrity of the equipment and keeps the operator and third parties safe in the process. So again, we're not here to cut off the conversation. We want to continue discussing what changes, if any, need to be made to the availability of service information. You know, we want to, in the process, address these important issues. Who's responsible in the event of an injury? How do we address and take the long view so that we are looking at this from a perspective with knowing that autonomous down the pike? You know, we don't want any short-sighted decisions to be made. We want to continue the conversation, and it might take several years or even decades to determine how this liability picture should shake out, but we appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you.
Yeah. And just with that, I want to thank everybody again for the opportunity to visit with you this morning. And again, at the end of the day, our manufacturers and our dealers, we really do believe that we're your partners in terms of how we help you with your farming operations. And, you know, we look at it and think, you know, when farmers are successful, we'll be successful. And when farmers suffer, we're going to suffer with you. So with that, we're going to continue to provide you with the best products and the best service at the best value, and give you the best experience. So with that, we'll open it up to questions if anybody has any.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, everyone. This is Jordan Dux on the line here finally, so we appreciate the presentations from everyone, and appreciate everyone jumping on today to provide their perspective. I guess we'd open it up to questions. And again, as Jay mentioned, if you have a question, feel free to click the button to raise your hand, or type in a message, or if you do have a microphone connected, you can do an audio question as well. So fire away on questions. And maybe while we're Jay, do you have a couple questions, or should I start with one, because I've got a couple to maybe start things off?
Yeah, Jordan, why don't you go ahead and start? I don't see any questions yet, but please raise your hands or ask those questions. We'll get those asked to the presenters. So. Perfect.
Well, and Jordan, could I make one point before we go into the first question? Just to respond real fast to something that Natalie said, because one of the major questions is, well, if there's a modification made to the software, it seems like it would be really hard to figure that out, and you'd have equipment that maybe somebody modified and that comes back to a dealer, and it'd be really hard for them, let's say, to meet their EPA emissions compliance. Because if we're not software folks, that sounds like that's a really challenging thing, because if you have a tractor and you want to know like what physical modifications have been made to it, you have to take the whole thing apart, and you have to analyze every single part to see if it's a third-party modification. So it's actually a really hard thing to do with a physical piece of equipment to tell if it's been modified. With software, it's one button. You click the button and you say, run a checksum and tell me if this is the same software that came on the equipment in the first place. And if it's different, you click another button that you say, just overwrite the software with the factory software, boom, done. So concerns about software modifications to equipment not being able to be verified or checked or brought back into compliance with EPA regulations are just not an issue. And I mean that's maybe an insight that I can provide as a software engineer. It's a really easy thing to do.
And I'd just like to respond to Kyle's comments. And this is something that I want to make sure, and for Kyle and Gay, you're probably aware of the legislation that was tried to be was initiated in Nebraska. Specifically, one of the groups that was involved in that legislation was a company that wanted to modify tractor engines, current model tractor engines, and modify them to run on compressed natural gas. One of the concerns there that they expressed is that compressed natural gas engines weren't being produced by manufacturers. And subsequently, when you look at that, one of the things they were, as a part of changing over, they would be going and circumventing that Tier 4 engine and Tier 4 engine exhaust system. You know, again, this is something, it's not so much that people are going to be able to tell or not tell what's gone on with that piece of equipment. It's the fact that it's being now something that it was not really ever intended to be. And yes, maybe that's giving consumers choice, which is fine, but at the same time, what liability exposure does that open up to our dealers and our manufacturers? And again, all the speculation about what's going to go on in a courtroom sounds great, but a good friend of mine who's an attorney, he always reminds me, you never ask a question in a courtroom that you don't already know the answer to.
Right. Well, we definitely don't want to open the dealers up to more liability, and I think that maybe this is an opportunity as part of this conversation. We could say, hey, are there some things that we could do to modify the statute to protect dealers a little bit better from this kind of thing? This kind of liability isn't new. I mean, if I took my brand new $300,000 tractor and I went out and I removed the spark plug, it might still run, but all of a sudden it's not meeting emissions requirements, right? Is the dealer going to be liable for that right now? I don't know, but let's do what we can to improve the law. We have a great opportunity right now. We're sitting here, we're around the table talking about this. The new legislation isn't going to be introduced until the beginning of the year, so let's make some improvements.
And Natalie hinted at this as well, and this is something that I think is really important again to discuss, is that we have tractors that obviously in all 50 states in the United States. Do we really need 50 different state laws laying out what people's rights or legal opportunities are, or would it be better to have this be federal legislation, especially dealing with the fact that there is federal copyright law that's involved in this as well? And again, we're not trying to, I know that the conversation that Farm Bureau is having is talking about this as a federal issue rather than just as a state issue. And again, Natalie talked about this, 50 different states, developing legislation, interstate commerce conflicting with that across state lines. I deal with this all the time in my own job. And then also, you have 50 different states worth of administrative rules and 50 different potential or more state courts also adjudicating that as well. And I don't know that that's the best process for developing policy that's going to affect farmers that are going to take equipment from one state to another or be sold across state lines. So anyway, that's just another point I wanted to bring up about local legislation.
Yeah, and that's a great concern. The problem is that farmers have problems today, and Congress is dysfunctional. So this potentially is something that could be solved at the federal level, but I don't think any of us could rely on. I mean, Congress can't even pass Zika legislation, much less something that's impacting farmers in Nebraska. So I think if we want to protect ourselves, we're gonna have to step up and do it at the state level. Fortunately, we're not really seeing this diversity of legislation. The legislation that's been introduced in different states is all very similar. And what happened with the most recent automotive right to repair law was it was a state law and it had all these state concerns that you bring up, but they dealt with it in the legislation. And then after Massachusetts passed the law, the manufacturers said, okay, well, let's just take the Massachusetts law and we'll implement that nationwide. And in exchange, the aftermarket repair group said, okay, we're not going to try to pass more state laws. And that seems like a really reasonable way for this to go. Nebraska could be the first.
Yeah, Kyle, I want to just reiterate one thing, is a lot of the things that you're talking about in terms of emissions and tinkering are copyright, and they are federal, and they can only be dealt with federally. Repair is not that. Repair is restoration. It is taking what is broken and repairing it or replacing the broken part with a spare part. So it's really much less intrusive than people believe. There still needs to be things done federally, copyright law being one of those things, but Congress is just, we're going to be 20 years. I'm going to be dead and buried before Congress gets anything done in this area. And all we really are trying to do is make sure that equipment owners, the legal owner of the property, it gets to decide how they want to keep their property, whether they want to pull it apart and turn it into something else, or whether or not they just want to fix it, keep it running. Those are the things that we expect when we purchase property. And that's really the extent of right to repair, is allowing people to keep their things in use as they see fit, which shouldn't be that big a deal. And in fact, a lot of manufacturers do most of what's required anyway. But I got to tell you, I was at the unicameral in February where we did have testimony, and a lot of what you've said in terms of access to materials was demonstrably not true. Legislators, senators kept asking various representatives, so when do I get to fix my tractor? And they really didn't answer the question, and it became very clear that manufacturers were really foot-dragging on providing access to the information, the diagnostic information, the tooling, the specifications, the schematics that anybody would reasonably need to fix property. And so, yeah, some companies are more in tune with this than others, but the intent of legislation is to make it a level playing field so that there is competition, there's an opportunity for an interested equipment owner to invest in their own training, to figure out and learn how to fix their stuff.
Okay.
I want to just jump back in there and apologize. This is something that, you talked about the Massachusetts login and, comparing that to what we're trying to, what's on the table today in terms of the discussion. And the idea that you have ownership to something is true, but there are restrictions on ownership. So for example, with a car, again, you run afoul if you take your car and you remove the catalytic converter. And that's, again, that's in the laws. And again, and also, as an example of this, if let's say you didn't like your seatbelt in your car and you cut or removed the seatbelt and drove it back into the dealership for service or repair, the dealer's not going to let you leave until he replaces that seatbelt, maybe whether they charge you or not, again, because of the liability if you go out and get in a car accident. And so this idea that, you have this absolute right to do whatever you want to your piece of equipment, it might be true in some circumstances, but in others there are restrictions. And again, when it comes down to farm equipment, those are some of those restrictions that we're most concerned about because they involve the software and operating systems that are on them.
All right, thanks everyone. We do have a couple questions. Jay, why don't you go ahead and fire away?
Sure. The first question is from Megan, and she's wondering that if this bill moves forward, will there be training for individuals that are interested in becoming technicians, such as through tech schools and that type of thing? She understands that there is a need in rural areas for having more people with the ability, but she does feel like they need to be trained to factory specs. So down the road, I guess, so I'm going to open that one up. Do you see that this would be more training available to technicians?
Can I answer that question?
Sure.
Go ahead, Will.
I'll just jump in, Megan. To answer your question, I mean, there's actually several schools around Iowa and Nebraska. Probably the most familiar one that maybe perhaps the people in Nebraska would be the Southeast Community College at Milford. And I don't believe that you have to be specifically enrolled there under a particular brand or a dealer. Many of our dealers do send employees there for community college and sponsor them, but they can go to there and receive training on how to repair farm equipment. And yes, there's some brand specific information, but there's a large part of that information is general knowledge, so people could go and potentially learn that. Get that information at one of the community colleges.
And just to piggyback on Will's comments, I mean, as far as we're talking about what the right piece of legislation would look like, we definitely feel that training requirements and training standards should be something that's included with the release of this type of sophisticated and complex service information.
One of the major beneficiaries of the auto right to repair laws has been the local community colleges. So while the legislation, we didn't want to be so onerous in the bill as to say, well, John Deere must make their authorized service training available to farmers that go through it, because we didn't want to place an additional burden on the manufacturers. So we just asked them to make the information available, make the same kind of service documentation and tooling available to farmers and to independents that they make available to their dealers. But what that also means is that you're making that information available to schools. And most community colleges have an auto program or an ag program where they're teaching people, and they rely on publicly available information. And a lot of them actually have trouble getting access to some of the dealers specific. They're not guaranteeing that every single student that goes through the program is going to end up being an authorized technician. So currently they're cut off from access to some information that they would like. So getting more information out there in the public is going to create more of an opportunity for people to create more of these training schools.
All right. Jay, any more questions?
Yeah, the next one is coming from Tom. He says he understands the concerns that the dealers have about liability, but his question is this something that is dealt with within the law, within the bill, or is it something that needs to be added to the legislation?
If I could jump in on that one, because we have a lot of involvement in writing the proposed bills, is that liability law is not altered by fair repair. And so whatever is, and there's, as far as we can tell, there's no real reason to change it. If the manufacturer organizations want to see some reassurances within the bill, we would like to find out what kind of language would reassure them, but we can't change law regarding liability in the state setting, I don't think. I think it's outside what we can do.
I would disagree. It absolutely is something that can be dealt with by statute. Obviously, the interpretation of that is going to be something else, but it's absolutely something that could be dealt with.
Years of experience knowing what happens when people modify their equipment and what the liability for dealers.
Yeah, let's get some some ideas out there because we're not adverse to it. We don't want to make liability worse.
All right. Any others, Jay?
Okay, we have Chelsea has her hand raised, so I'm going to unmute her microphone. It looks like her microphone is self-muted as well. So, Chelsea, if you would like to unmute your microphone. Oh, she actually took her hand down, so evidently she didn't have a question. The next question we have.
Hi, Chelsea.
Yeah, the next question we have, and this is from Megan again. So she was it's going back onto the comments made about the 50 state laws, and just are you looking at doing this in other states, and are you also looking at doing this nationally as well?
I'll take that one. Yes, there are multiple states with very similar legislation. We're trying to keep it as similar as possible for that reason. And frankly, I think that it's going to be a long time before the federal government takes this up. So it will help to have more states pass similar statutes, and that will encourage, I think, a uniform response from the federal government.
Yeah, the federal government is slow, and these issues tend to get fixed. I mean, this is a commerce issue. This is the kind of thing that tends to get fixed at the state level before it gets addressed at the federal level. There are some improvements. One of the things that Repair.org did was we worked really hard on behalf of farmers for an exemption to make it possible to modify code on tractors without access to the manufacturer tooling. And that exemption goes into effect in a month. It goes into effect.
Looks like Kyle froze up on us again. Oh, there you go, Kyle. Are you back?
All right, I'm back, yeah. So as of October 30th, it will be legal for you to be able to make modifications to software. But in order to do that, you really have to be a software engineer like me. What this bill will do is actually make the sort of skills that the dealer technician would have, which is having access to the dealer software, being able to plug it into the equipment, bypass sensors as needed. That's the type of thing that this would enable. The federal level bill basically says if you're a software engineer and a farmer, you can work on your equipment now, or as of October 30th. This would make it so that anybody can do it.
All right. Jay, any more questions? We're getting kind of close to the end here.
Yep, I have no other questions, but we still have a few more minutes if somebody does. But Jordan, if you have a couple of other questions, please feel free.
Well, they've kind of went through my gamut of questions that I had prepared already. They've done a good job of fully explaining the issue for me, so I appreciate that. And one of the things maybe I'll chime in just briefly as to, again, the purpose of this. Always, we at Farm Bureau can only enact policy or push for policy that is set by our members. And given the complicated nature of this particular piece of this issue, we just do not have policy on this, and so we wanted to make sure we provided an opportunity for our members to hear kind of both sides a little bit. So we, during our policy development process, which is going on right now, our members can kind of have some information and set the policy that they would like to see, and then we can pursue that. And so we, for the folks, our panelists, that conversation is taking place now, and we will have our annual meeting in December, and then at the federal side of things we'll have our annual meeting in January. So we'll kind of have more direction December, January as to where we're going to come down. But I may conclude it, I guess, unless Jay has any more questions real quick.
There is another question that came through.
Okay, go ahead.
And one of the concerns, and this is from Tom, that he has is with the autonomous equipment, and as we move more into that, that obviously brings more issues. Equipment is going to be becoming more technological as we go along. So he's just wanting the panelists' thoughts as we move to more autonomous equipment.
I'm going to jump in there, and certainly one of the things that I think is, and Kyle will probably like to hear this as well, but as more and more equipment becomes autonomous, whether it's cars or tractors or any other type of equipment, we're going to need to make sure that we can supply enough service to make sure that those pieces of equipment are fixed. So in reality, it'd be great that there'd be more trained, available people out there to be able to fix this equipment and make sure that it keeps running. At the same time, I want to just make sure that, again, we also reiterate this concern about who's getting in and accessing software when it comes to, or operating systems when it comes to that autonomous equipment. It's conceivable that somebody could hack into a car or a tractor and program that equipment to do something malicious, to damage property or to potentially harm and injure people. Again, it's going to be, cybersecurity is going to be a real concern when it comes to this. And again, when something does run awry or afoul, it's going to be important to know who's liable for that and making sure that they have the proper insurance coverage, things like that that are going to be essential. Whether that's a dealer, which dealerships typically carry large sums of insurance, or manufacturers as well, or perhaps what liability area would be on the third party, more of the do-it-yourself farmer, or perhaps a independent repair technician that doesn't really do, works on site, and what that concerns people as well as what liability insurance they'll have access to.
Well, I think the insurance companies will adapt. It's interesting, if you look at self-driving equipment, it seems to us like that's incredibly scary. It's so sophisticated, there's no way we could possibly understand it. Sorry, I'm back. So one point real quick is that the self-driving equipment is not necessarily all that crazy sophisticated. The key thing is to make sure that we have access to understand and to see what kind of data is happening on these things. When you go to self-driving, there's another leap of faith that we have to take in the manufacturers. And as we've been working on right to repair work, I've sat across the table from Volkswagen's lawyers, and they told me we're the only ones that know how this equipment works, that we're the only ones that can make sure that it's acting correctly. And clearly, it was not in all of our best interests to trust Volkswagen. It's the same thing when it comes to
we lost Kyle again, and maybe
cyber equipment manufacturers say. There I'm back. So I'll just, to sum up, we can't purely trust any single software engineer. We need as many people's eyes on it as possible. And right to repair will actually dramatically improve cybersecurity because we're going to see more eyes on the problem. And if we have access to the technician software, we'll be able to give that to security researchers, folks like at the University of Southern California that are working really hard on these issues, and they're going to be able to secure the equipment. It's really critical to have as many eyes on this as possible.
If I could just jump in, shortly, just really quickly. I think Kyle sort of identified what Will and I have been saying is what benefit is this type of legislation going to have for the average equipment owner? I mean, Kyle's got the benefit of all of his computer programming experience and that sort of thing. Simply giving the information to an equipment owner is not going to give them the skills or the time to learn the skills to fix that piece of equipment. So again, what type of benefit is the average equipment owner going to get by having that information? More likely, that information is meant to get into the hands of third parties like Kyle's now talking about, researchers and that sort of thing. So again, this is, from our perspective, the conversation needs to be, what is this legislation going to mean for the average equipment owner? And shouldn't that be our focus here?
All right. Well, and I know if we...
Jordan, 2 seconds. The information that's needed for repair was made by manufacturers to provide to technicians with some level of skill to make repairs. And that's why they created the diagnostics, is not to make it hard, to make it easy. So the average equipment owner will have a basic level of availability if they're interested to decide whether or not who they want to trust for repair. And that's not the copyright issue, it's not the self-driving issue, and it's not the cybersecurity issue, or the fiddling with emissions or performance issue. It is just repair. And I know we like to get excited about some of these other things, but those are really much more federal issues. And however we deal with them is probably going to have to ultimately be dealt with federally. Getting a tool, running a diagnostic, replacing a burnt part, that's repair. And we're trying to deal with this so that anybody that wants to repair a thing, a refrigerator, a network controller, a node out in the field that is not working. You know, you got all this GPS equipment, but it's based on sensors. If there's a sensor that's out, you got to fix the sensor. This is very basic stuff. So I just want to keep in mind that the owner of the equipment needs to keep this stuff in use. If they can't get a technician out to the field as soon as they would like, it's a financial harm. And I don't see any reason why there can't be more technicians without violating, you know, some of these other federal issues.
Okay, Jordan, we do have one more question. If we can make this one the last question, we're just a few minutes over, but
That's
basically,
fine. I have to jump off, so I want to thank everyone very much for attending. But I just want to make sure I said that. But I've got to run. So thanks, everyone.
You bet. Thanks, Jordan. So this will be the last question, and basically, this is coming from a gentleman here in Nebraska that says he is 47 miles away to the closest John Deere dealer, 132 miles away to the closest Caterpillar dealer. He says, you know, in the area we're dealing with a loss of population, but also just the ability to find a dealer that can repair his product. He's just wondering if this doesn't go through, you know, do the equipment dealers and the manufacturers have a plan on how we service more remote areas of the state, in particular in Nebraska?
Yeah, I can take a shot at that. And, you know, a lot of our dealers have incorporated service trucks into their business operations. They can take their repair parts and equipment and diagnostic and basically just diagnostic equipment and go on the road and travel all over the state. So that 47 miles actually, you know, is reduced greatly because we even have service technicians located in a more rural area and then not actually go anywhere, you know, maybe go back to the dealership once or twice a week and then they stay out for service calls. You also have, and I would say this, you know, other industries like on the construction side, Caterpillar and other equipment industries, for example, in the Bakken oil fields. They didn't build dealerships, brick and mortar dealerships, but what they would do is, again, have service trucks up there that would repair that equipment that was in remote areas, as well as in the cases if needed, they would fly parts in to make sure that they had parts in a timely manner and got that equipment up and running as well. So I think that's something that you'll continue to see more and more of as dealerships may consolidate, or you'll get fewer dealers per square mile or per capita, but you'll have greater service available through service trucks.
Okay. Well, thank
you.
you.
Do it yourself.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to follow up on any of that?
Natalie, did you have any comment you wanted to follow up as well?
No, I think, Will, you pretty much covered it. I mean, I think that our dealers realize that this is an issue, and they are investing a significant amount of capital and talent, frankly, in their workforce, which is competitive as it is, to make sure that they can address this problem for their partner customers.
Okay.
I think you sound like a really smart guy, and you're pretty capable of maintaining a lot of this equipment yourself. So I want to come out to your ranch and have you teach me a few things.
So, okay, well that wraps up all the questions that I have. I want to once again thank all of the participants that we had on the call today to view and get more information on this issue. And I also want to thank all of our panelists, Gay and Kyle, and also Will and Natalie. Thank you very much for presenting this issue and the counterpoints on this issue. I felt it was very interesting, and I think we've had a lot of good comments back from our attendees as well, that good questions and some comments on that end of it. So with that, I want to thank everybody and wish you well for the rest of your day today.
Thank you, Jake.
Thank you, everyone.
You bet.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Jay. This is great.
Yep.
Happy to do this anytime.
Okay, thanks, guys. Yep.
Bye.
Cheers.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks all.